like, I would think, how can I explain this? It's like how you kind of think you've got all these differences with people that you've not met before, or people you've not encountered from different places who have, like, different cultural values or, like, completely different upbringings and, like, ideals about life. And then it's like that thing that Yulia said, like, we watch the same Netflix shows. Like, I mean, maybe globalisation's done that to us all, but I mean, like, maybe we're not that different as what we think we are. So I wore a summer dress and, like, I really regretted wearing that, and, like, it's not that's not something that I'd normally feel guilty about being here, and I'd normally be like, oh, it's definitely the guy's fault of why, you know, it's not what you're wearing that determines how you get treated, but in that context it kind of does, and, like, you have to be really aware of that. And I think maybe when I met Rudin, I kind of thought if I hadn't been wearing that, maybe it wouldn't have happened, and it also at the same time kind of wasn't his fault. It was a really weird predicament to be in. I think one of my favourite memories is, like, suggesting the poetry workshop to Ahmed, and he'd been like, oh, I could never, ever, ever write a poem in English. Like, that's just not something that could happen. And I was like, I don't know, man, like, we'll give it a go and see what happens. And he just made some beautiful poetry, and, like, it was, like, one of the nicest things to, like, be able to sort of instigate something that he never thought he'd be able to do himself, but he actually really surprised himself, and he was better than he thought. It was really difficult sort of, like, defining boundaries between, like, how close you could be with people, because it's obviously natural that you develop friendships, like, anyway, because you find common ground or, like, things you're both interested in, but, like, you have to retain that, like, professionalism of, like, you can't leave avoiding someone's life, and you have to be really aware of that at all times. And yeah, like, probably cultural differences in terms of, like, what I'd feel comfortable doing here and how you have to change yourself so much to fit into that context of, like, to just not do any harm, basically. So, like, when we were dancing in the hub, and it was, like, literally the most, like, vanilla dancing I think I've ever done, but it was still, like, a huge issue for, like, some of the other volunteers. Like, I think the guys really enjoyed it, and it was, like, kind of fine for them, and maybe a bit of a shock because, like, they've not seen women dancing with men openly before. But for, like, the other volunteers, it was, like, one volunteer specifically, it was, like, way more of an issue, and he didn't think we should have been doing that at all. But then at the same time, like, I think you should be open and honest about who you are in any context, to a degree. So, I mean, I really think that Europeans have a duty to do what they can if they support the cause, or if they feel like against the political situation of what Europe instigates in terms of migration, in terms of refugees. I've forgotten the question.
Why do you think we've got a responsibility?
Oh, yeah. Because just politicians aren't doing enough about the situation, and, like, I felt like I needed to go and do that because as a European I massively disagree with what goes through Parliament and politics, so you have to kind of do it yourself, and that's kind of the times that we're in at the moment. And I think a lot of people are trying to do things externally to governments, like with the flooding in Hebden and everything. Like, people just had to pull together and use, like, community rather than government or councils to actually get somewhere and to support each other.